What is up, Mario Baseball Universe? It's me, Mr. Among Us Blaster, and today I want to talk to you about the ninth man picks in Mario Superstar Baseball. What I mean by a ninth man pick is the characters you'd end up selecting to round out your draft while also trying to fill any holes in either your field, lineup, or both. I'll be going over the options in 4 different categories based on character, and I won't be going over any characters that regularly get picked every game. Sorry to fans of Toadsworth, but you won't be hearing any words from me about your fave. For each character, I'll go over the reasons why you would want to pick them, as well as the reasons why you wouldn't want to pick them every game, as well as when they would fit your team best. With all that out of the way, let's start with the first category of characters, which are the pitchers. It's pretty obvious to see when you'd want to pick a pitcher, but in case you haven't figured it out, you pick a pitcher if you didn't end up with Boo or maybe Waluigi early on. And the reason you'd want a pitcher is pretty self-explanatory. If you don't have a good pitcher, you're probably going to lose the game, unless if you were just better than your opponent anyway, in which case you could probably just draft 5 Goombas and you'd probably win anyway. But the pitching options themselves, you got a decent amount of variety. You can pick Peach, you can pick Dixie Kong, or you can pick Diddy Kong. Peach and Dixie are generally the two better options, I would say. Peach has a bit less bat reach, but her pitches are a little faster. She does have a get out of jail free card in her star pitch, which does cost 2 stars unless you captain her, but most people cannot hit that thing consistently. So if you're stuck in a tricky situation, just star pitch your way out of it. The faster pitch speed is a bit harder to get used to, but once you're used to it, she gets things done. Dixie has a bit more bat reach. I'd say her offense is a little bit better than Peach's. Her pitches are a lot slower, which depending on who you're up against can be a blessing or it can be a curse. Some people struggle more with the faster pitches. Some people struggle more with the slower pitches. I would say your choice between these two comes down to personal preference. And then for Diddy Kong, you really are picking Diddy Kong if you want to mix up your opponent or if you just really like pitching Diddy. There's some people that are just incredible with Diddy Kong and trying to get around that while also picking your own character. It's just like he's just impossible to deal with sometimes. But if you know how to deal with him, or if you're going up against someone that isn't particularly good with Diddy, you're probably going to end up regretting it. Also, his offense is noticeably worse than these two because unlike these two who have push low traj, Diddy's stuck with mid low, and mid low traj always sucks. If you're picking Diddy and you're bunting with him every time, I just think you just shouldn't pick him no matter how good your pitching is. But these two will always give you hey, you got a chance of getting on base. Even if their bats are tiny, but Diddy just does not have that luxury. So when it comes to pitchers, I'd say stick with the classics and pick Diddy if you want to spice up your life or if you just know that you're really good with him. And then the next category of characters I'm going to call generalists. These are the characters that can generally fit most teams. You don't really need to plan around drafting them. It's just you finish out your draft and you notice, these characters are here. And you pick them. And they're great for you. And you have a great time picking them. There's 4 characters that I think fit this mold. And the first, and honestly, probably the most borderline of these characters that I'm going to talk about is Green Drybones. Now, the reason you pick Green Drybones is pretty simple. He has Line Drive Star Swing. He has Mid Traj with Line Drive Star Swing, which only Toadsworth shares that. And honestly, having the option to slap instead of Star if you need to is really nice. That's something that a character like Noki doesn't have the advantage of. And a character like Madge sometimes, if you don't know how to, if you're exclusively pushing with Madge, then it's not really a big deal. But if you don't know your timing, then Bones can kind of bail you out on that. Bones also has the advantage of chemistry with the best character in the game, Bowser, which means that you can set up Bones into Bowser. And then if they already weren't going to walk your Bowser, they definitely will now because chemmed up Bowser is just going to score unless you get horribly unlucky or if you're just really bad like me. Like if you're me, if I'm the one controlling the Bowser, then maybe this won't work. But most people, if you see Bones into Bowser and you get on with Bones, it just sets up beautifully. And that LDSS is really the thing that carries Bones because when it comes to his defensive properties, he's kind of just a flunky. He's not going to lose you the game most likely, but he's not really making any plays on the outfield in the way that a Noki or a Yoshi would. Obviously comparing anyone to Yoshi isn't really fair, but He does have sliding catch, which can potentially get you a ball that you might not get with like a similar speed character. But let's just say you're not drafting Bones for the defense. You're drafting Bones for the offense. And I think, realistically, Bones is probably going to get picked most games anyway. The only time that you wouldn't pick him is if you're either you just don't like Bones or if you're going for like a more specific character in mind. But I'd say Bones is probably the best option to pick. And maybe I shouldn't have even talked about him just because he's probably going to get picked anyway. But yeah, Bones is really good. Now, the next character I'm going to talk about, I'd say used to be in this category of where Bones is, but he's kind of fallen off recently, and that is a big potential man, Red Pianta. Now, Pianta, I feel like, has had a very contentious history across Mario Baseball. Everyone used to think he was dog shit, and then they were like, oh no, he's good actually. And then he found out about Falcon Pop, and like, oh, you can make him a lefty, and like, oh, you can pair him with Noki, he's got laser, he's got all these great traits. And then people kind of went back around, not all the way back around, but it's like, I don't know if I should pick him. So I'm going to start out with his good traits, which is he is a power character, which means that he has home run potential. He does have the lowest power of every power character at only 65, but he does make up for that by having pull. Granted, it is pull low trajectory instead of pull high like every other character with pull, but pull is pull. You can hold down, make good contact, and you can hit home runs with this character. And it's especially good if you have Noki on your team already, because Noki will make that respectable power into, oh, this is actually pretty good power. And honestly, like, that kind of thing can make a big difference if you're trying to hit homers with this character. The second thing about Pianta that stands out is Laser. And Laser is a very good ability. Every character with Laser benefits from having it, and Pianta's probably like the biggest defensive beneficiary of having Laser. Because every other Laser character usually has like good defensive qualities. Like Waluigi's an excellent corner. Donkey Kong just kind of does good anywhere. Bowser's got a big ass hitbox. Pianta's defensive profile isn't amazing, but Laser makes him kind of worth picking in those spots. Like if you desperately need a second baseman, or maybe like a first baseman that can have Laser, Pianta can fit into that real nice. And then the third thing, and probably the most niche case, but if it fits your team, he can be very good, is that he has access to Pop Fly Star Swing, which, if you're a righty, can function as the Joe Meister Pop. Now, if you don't know anything about Crit Nick Pop, I'll explain it. For righties, for some reason, if you sour with Pop Fly, it just barely goes anywhere. And if you don't know anything about righty Pianta's bat, it is atrocious. It is mostly sour, which means if you're trying to do the pop, as it's known, it just works out really well for the guy. Because as it turns out, when you're all sour and your goal is to sour, it's really good. The problem with Pianta is that he's it's kind of high risk, medium reward, because you can get good with making contact with Pianta, and sometimes you will just get screwed over. Sometimes he'll low traj on really good contact. Sometimes you'll think you hit the ball really well, but you're on a moderately sized stadium and it just doesn't go out. Sometimes Pianta will just miss a dive in the field that almost any other infielder would have made. Like oh, Wario would have made that. Or you can't bring up Yoshi in these examples, but Yoshi would have made that. Donkey Kong would have made that. Even Noki would have made that. Hell, there's a character I'm going to talk about in about 2 seconds that probably would have made that play. And sometimes Pianta just doesn't make it. Another thing is that while Falcon Pop is a very powerful ability to have, it does come with the problem of requiring a star. And if you don't have stars, righty Pianta is one of the worst characters to see if you're the hitter. Because if you're hitting, you don't want to have righty Pianta with no stars. So you can only really pick him for that purpose if you don't have other star hitters. Like if you have a team and your only other star hitter is like Birdo or like Captain Mario, I'd say you could probably get away with picking righty Pianta as your star hitter. But also, if you have more than like 2, I feel like you're really going to be hemorrhaging stars. So you really got to think about when you're doing righty Pianta. Uh, in addition, I think Pianta is kind of unpickable on a couple stadiums, mostly Garden. I think Pianta is terrible on Garden, which is like, obviously, Garden just doesn't really fit his strengths very well. You have no home run potential unless you're hitting perfects, in which case you can just do that with any other character too. Doesn't have to be Pianta. And while Laser is still nice, it's not that nice. I think you'd rather have characters that can make those defensive plays rather than characters that can make plays at home. And speaking of making plays at home, the last downside of Pianta is maybe the worst anti-chem in the entire game. Potentially the only relevant anti-chem in the entire game, which is Pianta to Petey. This is bad because it is the only anti-chem that will actively activate and take runs away from you, because you laser to home and Petey anti-chems, and suddenly a run you would have stopped is a run that scores. If Petey isn't your catcher, this isn't really an issue, but obviously this is something that sucks, and Pianta is basically the only character this really affects. Some characters get moderately affected by anti-chem, like if you're doing like Peach to Bowser or just like Luigi to Boo or something like that, but Pianta is definitely the character that suffers the most. And that's all I gotta say about the Pink Menace, as he's known. So let's talk about a character that you might pick instead of him, which is Daisy. Daisy's kind of the opposite of Pianta, where there's not really a lot of risk in picking Daisy, because she's a jack of all trades, master of none type character. She has a decent bat with decent bat reach. She can be a decent fielder in either the middle infield or the outfield. If you need a backup pitching option, she's pretty decent at that. She should never be a starting pitching option, but she's not really bad at anything. And if you don't really have any gaping holes in your team, you just kind of want a player that can do whatever you need to do, Daisy's kind of the perfect option for that, because she just kind of doesn't do anything poorly. If you skimped on middle infielders and you just need someone to fill in the hole, Daisy will do an adequate job. If you just need a left fielder or center fielder to fill out the fielding hierarchy, Daisy won't really let you down in the way that, like, imagine having to put Toadsworth or Bro out there. That sucks. Daisy won't suck like that. But the problem with Daisy is that she doesn't really have any crazy upside like any other character I'm going to talk about. She doesn't have LDSS like Bones. She doesn't have home run potential like Pianta. And she doesn't have, like, an incredible bat or like some kind of crazy offensive potential or crazy defense or LDSS. She basically just functions as a perfectly fine character, which is good to have when the rest of your team is solid. But if you think you need an extra oomph because you either messed up your draft somewhere or you want to go for some kind of specialized strategy, Daisy doesn't really fit that kind of role. She's more of a generalist, which there's nothing wrong with, but you can't always pick Daisy. And speaking of generalists, the last character that I'm going to talk about as a generalist is Toad. Toad is basically Bones, who trades LDSS for more speed and a much better slap. Toad's slap bat is kind of insane, where it's basically impossible to sour with unless if your opponent throws the ball like at you, in which case you lean into it and you get on base anyway. Toad also has a really funny thing that he can do, where if you have chemistry, you can just start swinging for the fences if you're a crazy person. Honestly, if you're on jungle, you don't even need to the chem if you really want to be crazy, but this isn't really something to plan around. It's just kind of a funny feature where it's like, oh, I got Toadsworth. I got to put him in front of Toad and swing for the fences. It's something you can do. It's not something I'd recommend, but it is something you can do if you want to be funny. The other thing is Toad has high speed, which is decent and making him a okay fielder. I'd say he's about the same tier of Bones as fielder, where Bones has sliding catch to make up for how slow he is, and Toad has decent speed. You can also pick your color of Toad. If you are a fan of Colors of the Rainbow, look at all these colors you have to pick from. Most people will default to Blue Toad, because there's an extra point of speed, and speed is pretty nice. That's kind of like a big, I wouldn't say it's that big of a deal, because the jump between 6 speed and 7 speed, subscribe, isn't really that big of a difference, but It can make a slight difference, and more speed is better than less speed. But it doesn't really matter what kind of color of Toad you want. They're all going to do the same thing for you. They're going to get on base fairly reliably and be okay in the field. There is one gaping flaw with Toad that other characters don't have to deal with, which is compared to someone like Daisy or Bones, who, if the situation calls for it, you can make them righty or lefty. I would say those two are a little bit better right. They're definitely better righties, but you can make them lefties if you need to. Toad does not have that luxury. If you make Toad a lefty, his bat goes from absurdly good contact to just like okay. And at that point, why are you even drafting Toad for just an okay bat? You're drafting Toad because he's got this good slap that you can take advantage of. And you can just put him in your lineup and be like, I'm swinging, I'm slapping. Toad can also struggle against left-handed pitchers, which can matter if your opponent is pitching Boo, because it's usually if you're going up against a lefty, you're going up against a lefty Boo. Maybe like a lefty Peach if your opponent sees that you're pitch hitting with mostly righties. But most people, I'd say most skilled players want a righty pitcher to take advantage of how many good lefties there are, and Toad can kind of punish them for doing that. If you are up against a lefty, though, you're going to have to be very careful with your at-bats, because pitching outside to Toad is very easy with his stubby little bat reach. But Toad's always a viable option. It used to kind of be like the go-to from my point of view, but I'm starting to realize that the defensive value that someone like Daisy might offer, or like Bones, or like someone like that, is better than the consistent slap of Toad. But he's still like a good option if you want him. And that's going to wrap up the generalist characters. I'd say there isn't really anything. They don't have any like gaping flaws most of the time, except for like Pianta sometimes don't pick him on Garden. But the rest of the characters have very specific niches that they are very good in. But I would say on a lot of teams, those roles are either already filled or are in excess. So let's talk about the specialist characters. And the biggest specialist character out of all of them is Bowser Jr. The Bowser Jr. deal is this. There's two reasons why you'd want to pick Bowser Jr. The first one, and probably the more likely reason you'd think, is that he has wall jump. Wall jump is kind of a good ability to have, because it can save you from getting home runs. And honestly, like Mario and Luigi are constantly like picked where they are because they have wall jump. But the reason why Mario and Luigi are always picked for wall jump and not someone like Bowser Jr. is that Bowser Jr. is a god-awful defender. He's slow, doesn't have a good dive, doesn't have great arm strength, and he's the worst character that you'd want to pick as a wall jumper, because he's just terrible at that role. Now, you might be thinking, oh, maybe you'll pick him for the offense because, you know, he's a power character. You can charge with him. No Chem Bowser Jr. is probably the worst character to charge with out of all the power characters. Even Pianta has a bit more going for him because Pole Trash does a lot for him. But Jr. just kind of hits the ball and it don't go out. Wario has power problems. Bowser Jr. has worse power problems, especially without any Chem. So you're thinking, okay, maybe I'll just slap with him. But Bowser Jr.'s slap is kind of weird. It's just like a bizarre thing. He has weird traj with mid-high, which means on the upside, you aren't really going to double play with him very often. But on the downside, you are going to fly out a lot with Bowser Jr.'s slap. There is a way. It is definitely possible to be somewhat consistent with it. Shout out to Legendary Bolt for just hitting remarkably well with this character for some reason. But you have to be very precise and hit like towards the foul line or like up the middle and hope that the ball just doesn't go too high where a character can just make a diving catch on it. And if you don't do that, you're just going to fly out a lot and you're going to be very upset. But there is a second reason to pick Bowser Jr. And this one is admittedly kind of cool. So let's just say you're the Bowser team, and you also happen to have Magic Koopa. Because here's another advantage to Bowser Jr., which I haven't really said any advantages to Bowser Jr. yet, but here's an advantage to Bowser Jr. He has probably one of the best chem trees in the entire game because he's got chem with Big Bowser, Big Bro, and Big Madge. And all of those characters are both good and likely to be next to each other in the lineup. Because if you have Bowser Bro, you can just stick Junior behind them. And if you have Bowser Madge, you can stick Junior behind them. And if you have Bro Madge, you can stick Junior behind them. And if for some reason you have all three, by some miracle, you can have triple chem for Bowser Jr. Which, that sounds incredible. And it honestly, when it is in action, it turns Bowser Jr. from unreliably hitting home runs to actually being able to do it. Especially on the smaller stadiums like Palace and Jungle. Honestly, on Jungle, I think this is so... I think Bowser Jr. is legit on Jungle. I think he's, better than most of the other options I've talked about. Under these specific circumstances. And I gotta narrow it down a little bit more, actually, because I said Bro is included in this, but realistically, Bro is kind of an all-or-nothing character. Setting up Bro to give chem to Bowser Jr. is not going to work, because Bro is either going to hit a home run or get out. He's not reliably getting on base in the same way that Madge and Bowser are. If you do have Bowser and Madge, you can set up Bowser into Madge, and then Bowser Jr. can be your cleanup, in addition to Madge, because Bowser Jr. doesn't require any stars, so it doesn't really matter if, Madge requires a star, and someone like Birdo, or Noki, or, Toadsworth, you need to have a star for that. Bowser Jr. doesn't require a star, you just have to be good at the game. And that's the third problem with Bowser Jr., is that if you are bad at the game, you should not pick him in these situations. In the situations where Bowser Jr. is at his best, I do think you need to be good with him to really get the most out of him. He's not just a plug-and-play character. Just because you have Bowser Madge and you're on Jungle doesn't really mean you should pick him every time. Because if you suck with Bowser Jr., it feels like the biggest wasted pick of all time. And if you pick Bowser Jr. in a spot where he's not good, you're going to feel the same way. It's like, oh, why did I pick this character? He stinks. But when Bowser Jr. shines in that situation, I think he's legit good. I also would not recommend picking him and doing the strategy on larger stadiums like Garden or Park, because the bigger outfields just don't really work for Bowser Jr. You'll hit the ball far and it just won't go out. He's got the Pianta problem where his lack of power just sucks. And honestly, at that point, you might as well just pick the other wall jumper if you didn't end up with one of the Mario Bros. And speaking of that wall jumper, let's talk about Toadette, who is the most main character, non-captain character in the entire game. Toadette's pretty straightforward. Her defense is incredible. Her offense is total dog shit. That's basically it. Toadette is basically just the wall jumper that you pick if you're not the Bowser team and you didn't end up with Mario and Luigi. Because Toadette's defense includes sliding catch, 9 speed, a pretty decent dive, and wall jump. She can make wall jumps that no other character can. She can make plays in the outfield that almost no one else can make. Hell, honestly, if you really just want a middle infielder that's decent, Toadette can do that too. Toadette basically does anything you'd want on defense, except for pitch and play catcher, but those are pitching is so specific, and being catcher, just get someone with a strong arm. They don't have to be good. It's put Petey back there, put King Boo back there. But the problem with Toadette is that her bat might be the worst in the game, and I'm trying to think of who else even comes close. Maybe Paragoomba is worse, but her slap is mid-low with the second worst reach in the game, and the contact isn't really all that good either. It's not that bad, but she is not hitting the ball into play very often. And when she does, it's going to go straight to a fielder, and you're going to be like, ugh. I think Toadette doesn't really work on teams that have multiple characters that are reliant on having stars to get on offense, because that sometimes when you don't have stars, you just kind of struggle with getting people on base. Like, oh, I have Noki and Birdo, and I don't have any stars. And Birdo's not the best at getting on base without stars. And Noki has mid-low, so she's not the best at getting on base. You want to add Toadette onto that, and you're just like, ugh. I do think she can work on teams that already have a lot of good offense that can afford to just have, like, a hole in their lineup. Like a 2P team that has, like, 3 heavies and, like, a good star hitters that don't mandate stars. And, like, oh, you got, like, Wario and Waluigi if you want to hit, like, home runs. And, like, a decent, like, a captain that doesn't, like, mandate the captain star, like Luigi or Mario. It's like that kind of situation is where you'd want to pick Toadette, and especially if you do not have a. Obviously, I just talked about Mario and Luigi, but also if you don't have a wall jumper, or for whatever reason you want a second wall jumper, Toadette can definitely fill in there. But you gotta accept the fact that there's going to be a hole in your lineup, and you might cry. You might start crying. And the last specialized character I'm going to talk about is honestly kind of sad. It is Green Paratroopa. Green Paratroopa, on paper, sounds like a really good character. Well, not maybe not a really good character, but he sounds like a character that you'd want to pick. Because he's got Line Drive Star Swing, Super Jump, respectable throwing arm with a weirdly quick windup that means you can just get some cheeky plays sometimes. Or just have like a pseudo-strong arm out of the outfield. And he's got Bowser Chem. 2 of these things are shared with Bones. But there's one thing that Bones has over Green Para, and that is the Green Para's bat without stars is abysmal. It's not as bad as Toadette's just because you have more reach, but it is pretty goddamn bad. It's got really low slap power, the contact zones aren't necessarily the best, and having a mid-low slap to rely on rather than a mid-mid slap makes a world of difference when you are line drive star swinging. And let's talk about LDSS. It is a really broken ability to have because Madge is so good because LDSS is crazy. Toadsworth is good because LDSS is crazy. Noki is worth picking because LDSS is so good. Bones is a great filler character because LDSS is so good. But there comes a problem when there are too many characters that have it. So let's just say we're doing a draft, and my team has Birdo, Madge, Toadsworth, and the other team has Mario, Green Bones, and Green Noki. That's a lot of star hitters. Do you really have room in your star economy for a 4th? And the answer 99% of the time is no. You really don't. Because Birdo really wants the stars. Madge really appreciates having stars. Toadsworth and Bones don't necessarily mandate it, but it's nice to have the option. And, like, having the option to star rather than being forced to star is always good. Noki kind of mandates having a star if you really want to do anything on offense. Mario Fireball obviously wants the star, although Mario needs it less than Birdo. He still likes it, though. And then Green Para is another character that mandates a star. And he's just the worst of the bunch, because Bones has better offense, Noki has better defense, Toadsworth has better offense, and it's just a better LDSS. Madge is fucking broken. Birdo has Birdo Egg, which is just crazy, which is like higher highs, although you do have some lower lows. Mario is a better defender with a better slap. And even though Mario Fireball does have some problems, like, it's still good at scoring runs. Let's not beat around the bush. He still gets it done. Green Para kind of just has that weird windup and super jump. And realistically, if you have good corners, the super jump isn't all that useful. So it's just the weird windup and and then also the Bowser Chem. But there's a better character with Bowser Chem. So just pick Bones. Green Para is just kind of outclassed, and he doesn't really fit in the way that other characters do. You can pick him. I don't think you're throwing if you pick him, but you just have to accept that it is generally a worse option than any of the other LDSS characters. And also, if you pick him, you're old. Most people I've seen pick Green Para regularly are above the age of like 25. Which is just like, get into a retirement home, guys. Just joking. Ha ha ha. But he is still a character that is worth picking. And the last 7 characters that I'm going to breeze through are not worth picking under 99% of circumstances, these are the undesirable losers. And I'm going to start with the most desirable, which is Shy Guy. So remember how I said that Daisy was a master of none, jack of all trades? Shy Guy's like that, except worse. And Daisy is already kind of on the fringe. So imagine how bad Shy Guy's got it. He's basically just kind of a mascot pick, I'd say. You pick him if you like him. He does have access to a broken ability called Remke Pop as a righty, which you can even have 2 different color Shy Guys do this, because you can pick whatever color Shy Guy you want, and it really isn't going to make that much of a difference on how good he is. But, you know, if you really want to use Seth Pop, then, like, I guess Shy Guy's probably your best option that isn't Pianta, but he's bad. You shouldn't pick him unless you really like him and you don't care that much about winning. Speaking of characters that you use if you don't care about winning, Goomba is truly like the opposite of being a jack of all trades. He's not good at anything. Not even like remotely like competent at anything. He's got a pretty bad bat, although mid-traj makes it not the worst. The bat reach is atrocious though. Probably the worst fielder in the game. Not a good pitch. He's just not good at anything. He doesn't have a hole in the field that he fills. Ball dash is a funny ability, but all it really does is make it so people don't steal on you from first to second. Because if you put him at anywhere that isn't first, you shouldn't even pick him. So Goomba's dog shit. Koopa, remember how I said Shy Guy was worse Daisy? Koopa is worse Shy Guy. Except trade in some bat reach for Bowser Chem, and you only get 2 colors to pick from instead of 5. So if you're a fan of the colors of the rainbow, you won't like Koopa as much as Shy Guy. He's got the same thing. He's got access to Grump Pop. Like, it doesn't really matter. He's not really a character you should ever really consider using in most circumstances. He's bad. He's bad. We're Shy Guy. Then we got the babies. Some people will swear by Baby Mario being a character you can pick. No, don't pick Baby Mario. These two are like worse versions of Toadette, where they have slightly better bats, but they're worse defensively because they don't have the good abilities that Toadette has, like 9 speed and sliding catch. And they're also tiny, so sometimes you're trying to make a fielding play with them and the ball just goes over their heads, and you end up in a Mario Baseball epic fail montage, and it's just embarrassing for everybody involved. Granted, I think they're better than these two Chud characters down here. Monty Mole is very popular, and he does have really long bat reach and ball dash. Unfortunately, everything else about him sucks massive dick. He does not have a good bat, despite the fact that it's got good reach, because he's got terrible trajectory. And he's god-awful in the field in the same way that Goomba is. And I only think he's slightly better than Goomba because he has an extra point of speed. And like that's kind of it. Goomba's bat is slightly better, I would say, just because it has mid-mid. So if you do make contact with his terrible bat, and it's nice contact, it might land. Monty Mole is like, he got a big belly. That's kind of his selling point. But he's still better than Paragoomba. Paragoomba is the worst character in the game. He's got, I might have a bat that is on par, if maybe either slightly better or slightly worse than Toadette. Because I just think you can make nice contact with this, and it will just never land. Defensively, he's a little bit better than his Poop Squad compadres, but like, he's got super jump, a little bit more speed than Goomba, and a better arm. But that's really all he's got. Like, don't pick any of the characters I just talked about. Like, just if you want to like have some fun, just pick Bones. Just pick Bones. Just pick Koopa. Just pick Daisy. Just have a way better time. If you really want to pick Shy Guy, he's the least throwing of the bunch, but just you should not pick him. And I think that's gonna do it for the 9th man in Mario Baseball. This is my first time recording a video like this, so I imagine it's going to be a little messy, but if you liked what I talked about, Tell me why and leave a like. If you didn't like what I talked about, please tell me what you didn't like and what I can improve on. And I'll catch you tomorrow, the next day of Year of the Blaster.